Polson, Montana, and the Miracle of America Museum, the destination for our next episode of Painting and Travel. Sarah learns what life was like living in a sod-roofed cabin, and Roger uses acrylics to paint the historic structure.
We're in Polson, Montana, and we found the most interesting museum. We've parked out front and we've been through one of the main buildings, and now we're on the back part, which houses all sorts of fascinating things, and I'll get to show you some. Meanwhile, Roger's going to set up to do some sketching and painting.
I'm going to use a 9 by 12 inch piece of masonite covered with gesso as my painting surface today, and I'm going to sketch it with a piece of charcoal and using the broad side of this charcoal just to get the big broad shapes to begin with. And I like to do this on many occasions because the big areas of a painting are really what counts much more than the detail. And if I put a shape in like this and I don't like it, I can just wipe it off easily and I can move it around. If I were to draw this with a pencil, it would mean more of an investment in time, and I might not be quite so willing to change it. But with charcoal, I can block in these large areas and see just where the composition is going to go. So here we've got the log cabin, got the tree back there. You see, just by blocking in these patterns, I get an abstract shape, and it can be a strong abstract pattern. Then I can build around that with all the details. A few minutes ago, it was raining here, and now the sun is popping out. So we're going to probably go back and forth with some very unusual weather here today. I love those mountains back there. Don't really need to put those in, but those will be right back in this area. We'll just lay those in very lightly. Basically, I want to get this big shape here to start with. It's never a crime to leave things out of a painting. So this building over here to the right of the log cabin, I may leave that out. Sometimes too many things in a painting will diminish the importance of a painting. So I'm never afraid to leave something out. Once I get this charcoal laid in here, I can just blow it off like that, get rid of some of that. Really, the acrylic paints, which I'll be using today, really won't interfere with that at all. Now I can take a pencil and I can start to define some of these areas that will really end up as being more detailed. And there's a little bit of perspective here, but that house sort of a rounded sort of a shape on that roof. We've got some light catching this in here now. I'm not going to worry about too much drawing here. I'm going to concentrate on the big areas. There's some old machinery on this side. I may just indicate that with a few brush strokes. We have this nice windmill up here. That will be right in here. But don't need to add too much of that yet because that tree is going to go in first and then the windmill will go in later. Well, I'm going to get my acrylic paints out now, so let's join Sarah as she looks around the museum.
This is Gil Mangles. He's the founder of the Miracle of America Museum, and we're standing here out on the grounds in front of the sod house. I've never been this close to a sod house, so I'm pretty excited to learn about it. I guess what makes it a sod house is that it has a sod roof.
Well, some were built actually full out of sod. This was a log cabin with a sod roof. It was built in about 1898 or so.
Did you have to re-chink it?
No, we left it kind of as is. It's interesting that in some of the chinking there's animal hair, and there's a couple of places where they nailed some barbed wire so it would hold the chinking.
Oh, so it kind of holds it all together to have some fibers in there.
The fibers, yes, held the chinking together. They mostly use clay.
Now, is this a starter home?
Well, for many people, you wonder how they did it, but they raised big families in here. They must have sent all the rest of the kids off someplace fishing or getting water or something to get intimate enough to produce another one. I don't know. I've always wondered how they could how they could have 12 people in their family in a little house this size.
I'd like to look inside and get the feel for it.
You bet. We furnished it pretty much as it would have been.
They say the kitchen is the heart of every home, so we'll start in this part of the room. I noticed there's a beautiful iron stove. How did you fire it?
Well, normally they fired them with wood, but if you didn't have any wood around or you weren't living next to a railroad, that would you get chunks of coal off the side of the track that would spill over from the tender or the cars. Well, then you sent your children out to pick up buffalo or cow chips. And you had to make sure they were dry. And when you're burning these, remember what this is. It smells like grass burning. So
yeah. It's very fibrous.
It's recycled grass is what it is. So there's your cow chip. And that made good fuel. And they heated their water on there for taking the bath or other uses. You know, you do your cooking on there. Here was a waffle iron. You put your batter in there. And then it got cooked on one side. You lift it up and flip it to the other side.
I'm impressed they have a waffle iron. It just seems like a sophisticated tool.
Now, these sad irons for ironing your clothes, you had a set of 3, and we don't have the room here, but you would release it. That one would heat up, and you'd grab the hot one, and there you do your ironing. And then if it was a little too hot, you'd maybe one off to the side of the stove a little bit and do the third one. And you just keep rotating like that. So I don't know. They're called sad irons, and I don't know if that was because the woman was pretty sad from doing all that ironing.
I would think so.
But a lot of work back then. But you know, in spite of it, they raised wonderful, happy families, and really neat. This was called the warming oven. When they mixed up their dough, put it in a bread pan, they would put it in there, and of course the heat from the stovepipe would make the heat off of the stove itself would warm the dough into
the yeast would make it rise.
Make it rise and into your loaf.
I guess this is a sleeping quarters, so you've got your double bed here with your homemade patchwork quilt, and then a little dressing table.
Homemade cabinet there, and some more quilts and various toiletries.
And a mirror. I wonder if that's something that traveled here the first time, or if that was a luxury.
That was kind of a luxury, but they tried to get a mirror out so they could, you know, those that shaved could use it or doing their hair. The dirt floor.
Yes.
This one isn't packed down as well as they would have had it packed, and they tried to use clay and then wet it, and the clay will hard pack when they stamp it down or roll it down. Some of the furnishings, the other furnishings, of course, the oval picture frame of the baby there, and possibly it's christening clothes. And then we have a bearskin coat over there, a little worse for wear.
Oh my!
And a shotgun and a little strap there for hanging some ducks in there.
And I like the use of the antlers for the gun rack.
Yeah.
The latest in washing machines.
Okay, the agitator's inside. You would get that started with the flywheel, which the flywheel kind of gives it some momentum. And you would crank back and forth, and the agitator inside would swish the clothes around in the water. I don't know if people really thought about it, but you're swishing the clothes through the water goes through the pores in the clothes and washes out the dirt. And of course, then after you're done washing, you want to wring the water out, and you don't want to get anything caught in there. like hair,
like your finger
or your hair or other parts of your body.
Oh yes. And so who does this? This is not as easy as it looks.
Well,
do you get your 12-year-old to do this?
If they could get the kids to do this, if they could catch the kids long enough, they weren't out picking up buffalo chips or water from the spring.
Gil, I have really enjoyed the interior. It's very sweet, very cozy, and I don't know that I want to copy it, but I can see spending a night here maybe sometime.
Well, give me some heads up. I'll dust it off a little bit, and you and Roger can spend the night in here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
I have my acrylics on my palette now. I have titanium white, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, Indian yellow, alizarin crimson, chromium oxide green, and I have 3 earth colors: yellow ochre, burnt umber, and burnt sienna. I often like these earth colors, especially with some of these landscapes out west here. For my brushes, I have primarily flats that I'll start out with. As I look at the log cabin with that sod roof, I'm trying to figure out sort of a local color. You know, a natural thing to do would be pick up a lot of brown because of those logs, but really there's so much other influence going on in something like this. So I'm going to mix some cerulean blue and some ultramarine blue with that, give it a blue cast to start with, make this sort of a dull bluish, brownish gray color right in here. And I'll just block these areas in. And as you can see here, there wasn't too much need to put in a lot of detail because I'm following my abstract pattern here to start with, to just block in these areas. We get this tree back there, so I will pick up some of the green. I'll block these in as big shapes. I'm using the paint rather thin, and these are acrylics, so they're going to dry fast. I'll be able to go over them almost in no time at all. I'm changing the composition somewhat. I'm moving the tree a little bit more this way. And the other house back there, although it's very nice to look at, I'm not going to put that in this painting. I'm just going to put in some more trees. Okay, so that makes up my abstract pattern. I'll just keep building on that. I want to start with my darks, so these are primarily my darks first. I'm not going to use any white at all in the painting yet. Here I'll put in this sort of a yellow ochreish color for the ground. Painting at this point always looks a little scary, a little funny because it's so basic at this point. We got the mountains back there. Here I am going to pick up some white, put in just an indication of the mountains back there. This is Glacier National Park in the background. Another incredible place to visit. Going to have a lot of nice little negative areas in this tree. We won't put in many of those yet, but those will be the negative areas. And we've got an ever-changing sky here. I'm going to warm this sky up with some yellow ochre, have this sky quite light. I have some of the cerulean blue in there from the mountains, and I'll just add some of that yellow ochre to that to warm that sky up. I can't stress enough about, at least for me, putting in these big shapes to begin with and not worrying at all about the detail. As I squint my eyes and look at this dirt road down here is almost lighter than the sky at this point. But as the sun goes in, as it just did, all that changes. I sometimes wonder what the advantage is to painting out here on location because things change so much, but it's really the experience of getting out here that makes a painting what it is. Working from a photograph is good, and I do that very frequently, but working out here in the field, it's just very rewarding, I think. Although difficult. Like I said, it poured rain here just before we got started. Got this dark area right under the eaves here. We've got some nice light on the subject a little bit lower. But I'm going to make this keep this dark down here for the time being because I want to put my lights over my darks. And I'll leave this dark area right in here for the dark areas between the logs where the chinking is. You'll see how that comes together in a little while. Okay, big basic shapes. Sure doesn't look like much now. Hopefully I can pull this off in time here. But see, the edge of the building I think is going to be right here. We've got some nice old farm equipment back in there. I won't put that in yet. I'm just going to build on my values. It's a bit of a shadow on this side of the cabin, so I'm going to cool that, put some cerulean blue in there. So now I'll bring that tree up. I don't know what kind of tree that is, but out west here we have this, like the sage is a beautiful blue-green color. I'm just falling in love with that color. So that's the color of that tree there. Sort of a ochreish, cerulean, I don't know. Beautiful color though. I don't think about the colors that much when I'm painting. It's very intuitive. I know people like for me to tell them what colors I'm using, but these colors can be mixed in so many different combinations and so many different ways to make the same color. A lot of it just comes with experience. It's almost like handwriting. After a while, you just get to know what you should pick up. It's a little bit darker down here, which is nice because this sod coming across the roof, if this is darker down in this area, when I place that sod in there, it will show up even better. I jump back on those mountains again because those are very flat. They're so far in the distance that we don't see any ridges to speak of back there. So this is just a flat cerulean blue color. Here's where I can cut in with my brush and make some of these negative areas in that tree. Now these negative areas they may look very arbitrary, but what I'm trying to express here is the space between the branches and the leaves. So I can't just put dots anywhere. I have to, especially if some areas, selectively think where these negative areas need to appear. It's really important to define the edge of the tree more so than in the inside here, because the description of the tree will really lie at the edge of the form and not so much in here. You can tell it's a tree really by the edges here, not so much by what's in the middle. Now one nice way to define the trunk of a tree is by negative areas. So if I put, say, a negative area right here, and I put another one right beside it, that will indicate, see those two trunks of trees there, or branches. With some burnt sienna, yellow, ochre, and white, I'll tip in some of these weeds that are growing on top of the roof, and just drag my brush upward as I do that. In this area, having been dark back here, it tends to show up rather nicely. But with a piece of chalk, I can now add some more areas of interest here, like the windows, doors, and so on, the windmill here. And since the acrylics are totally dry, it's easy to go over this. And once again, by using chalk, if I don't like the area where I have indicated there, I just have to wipe that off. Well, this dark area here now will pay off slightly. Now with my burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and a few other colors, I'll lay in these logs here. This is where putting the dark color on first will pay off, will be to my advantage, because now by putting this light color over it here, I can now see where the door and window is, and I can just stop right at the edge there. And, well, those windows are low, aren't they? They really go down. Okay, so put in the next ones on up. And I'll do the same thing on the side. This is really in shadow, all this. So I'll use a darker color, maybe the ultramarine blue and some burnt umber, and I'll lay some of these logs in this way, but I'll still keep them quite dark. And I can strike with this same brush, the same color. A few areas where this chinking is. This chinking seems to be lighter here on this side. I can see it quite easily. I don't need a small pointed brush for this. This small flat brush will do the job. And I just need to keep refining this, lightening some areas, darkening others. I'll mix some ultramarine blue and burnt umber, and right in this door we'll make that very dark. Same goes for the windows right here. And maybe a deeper shadow right under the eaves. I love that machinery beside the house there. I'm just going to place that in very nondescriptly. I don't know what it is. It's very old. Doesn't really matter. So, you know, it's not that distinguishable. And so I'm just going to place some shapes here just to indicate what might be some old machinery. Touch of white here. We've got that wagon wheel over here, a wagon wheel. And again, I'm not going to try and describe it in all its detail. And of course I can work on this more in the studio if I want to put the finishing touches on it. And that's often a good idea, is to get the basics down while you're out on location and then finish it in the studio, because the light changes every few minutes and changes the whole complexion of the painting. Those weather vanes are very unusual, but I'm just going to indicate sort of a round area here. See, it looks like there's about 5 points on that. Down here, this is pretty much the focus of this painting, the house here, so I think I need to punch this up so this shows up a little nicer. Take a larger brush and work on this area down here. Scumble some more earth tones. Yeah, put a few more browns in down there. Let me grab this cerulean blue. I've found a lot of use for cerulean blue lately. I go in spurts where I'll use certain colors, or you just use very few colors, and other times I'll use more of a full palette. I think this area back in here, I'll add a few more of the mountains down in this area because I need to define this area. I think I'll pull that mountain right down in here so we can see some of that mountain. This will define the edge of the building. Even though there's another building in back of that, I'm not going to put that building in there, but we will put something right here to define the edge and the shape of the log cabin. And I can mix some other greens. Maybe I can make this a darker green to put some foliage back there. We'll sort of invent some foliage. I haven't picked up my chromium oxide green yet, so I'll use some of that. And we'll put in a little bit of that grass in the front here and right by the side of the cabin. And maybe we'll put a little field or something back here just to make some variation back in this dark area. So I'll put sort of a horizon line back in there. So we might put what might look like a field in the distance. I haven't used a small brush at all in this painting. I've stayed with the larger brushes. Here's our dog Mickey over there checking out all the equipment, the farm equipment. With yellow, ochre, and white, I'm going to put a little path right in here. It will just come this way towards us. Wow. Not sure. I think I feel a few sprinkles now again coming down. But starting to sprinkle here again just slightly. The weather's been really iffy today. So I think I'm going to take some photographs of the log cabin and then we'll take it back into the studio and finish it there. To finish this painting back here in the studio, I started by adding quite a bit of detail. I began to lighten up and add a lot of color to these logs on the front. Other details of the antler and the saw were added. And up here on the windmill, I decided to leave these colorful areas here unlike most windmills, but it added a nice note of color. I also added some branches to this tree, and then I worked on the negative areas in here. And in the background, I've decided to keep this landscape fairly simple with just a basic landscape look. I did add more farm equipment down in this area using my reference photo. These two areas here needed to be tied together just a bit more, so I took some chromium oxide green as a wash and just covered these two areas. That made these areas here a bit more unified. I tidied up these straight lines on these logs and added more color with some cool bluish colors and some warmer burnt sienna colors, just to create more of a variation. I darkened the foreground here slightly, just so this path would have a little more contrast and show up a little better. To finish the painting, I put in these small patches of blue just to indicate a few little puddles of water. And there again, it just seemed to tie the colors together a bit better. But still the painting was missing something, and if I had to do this painting again, I would have changed the composition slightly. This whole area right here is a large area that doesn't say too much. I tried to put a little bit of farm equipment in there, but it just didn't look right because it took away from the center of interest here. So what I did was I sketched in these two hound dogs using a pastel pencil, and then I painted the hound dogs in. That added a little more interest to this area that didn't have much going on. I'm sure I'll be doing other paintings here at the Miracle of America Museum in Polson, Montana in the future because I took a lot of reference photos there. Sarah and I enjoyed our trip there very much. It's a great place to visit.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.